Sonoma Planning Commission, Climate Action Commission, and Parks and Recreation and Open Space Commission. My name is Matt WIRICK. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. And I'd like to briefly recognize David Morrell, the chair of the Climate Action Commission.
Thank you, Matt.
And Charlie Tolbert, the vice chair of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission. I will convene and call to order this meeting. And if I could get a roll call, please.
Yes, we'll start with Planning Commission. We have Chair WIRICK.
Here.
Vice Chair Nugent.
Here.
Commissioner Barnett.
Present.
Commissioner DAMBACH.
Here.
Commissioner O'Gorman-Jenkins. Commissioner O'Neill. Commissioner Willers.
Here.
All right, and moving on to Climate Action Commission, we have Chair Morrell.
Here.
We have Vice Chair Conlon.
Here.
Commissioner Baston.
Here.
Commissioner Heinerman. Commissioner McCloskey.
Here.
Commissioner Ward.
Here.
And moving on to pros, we have Vice Chair Tolbert.
Here.
Commissioner Cullinan. Commissioner Donnelly.
Here.
And Commissioner Mizuraka. Here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Menifee, if I could get you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you, sir. Expertly led. So tonight's agenda contemplates one matter, and it is an item for discussion, and that is item 2.1, is to receive the presentation on the results from the citywide tree inventory and the urban tree canopy assessment, and to discuss draft reports and provide any comments or questions. Staff report, please.
All right, thank you. Jennifer Gates, Community Development Director. I'm just going to do one quick introduction and then pass it along to my counterparts. So tonight there'll be three of us presenting. We have Dave Jans, our Parks and Rec Director, who some of you have met, some of you haven't, so yay, we have one. Also, part of the presentation will be Jacob Dunn, who is an Associate Planner for those in pros that may not know him, so he'll be doing a lot of the presentation of what the findings were. And then also I wanted to introduce two other staff members that are here. We have John Meserve, our city arborist, as well as our new sustainability coordinator, Antoinette. So I wanted to welcome them. With that, some of you are new to your commissions and some of you were here when we started this 2 years ago. I can't believe it's been 2 years. It flew by for a lot of us, I think. So in January of 2024, we held our first joint commission meeting with all three of these commissions and started discussing tree policies. And the commissions provided their initial direction on those priorities. Those minutes and those meetings can be found online, of course. In February of 2024, City Council had identified trees in all caps as one of the priorities or goals that they set during their goal setting session. Also in February 2024, right after that, the Joint Commission, we met again. We talked more about what we had discussed previously, and you all as commissions, we set out specific tree priorities. We discussed those and discussed which needed ad hocs. Director Jans is going to go into a little bit more detail of the accomplishments that we have had, but I just want to also note that in what's occurred in 2025 is we adopted the city master tree schedule, an updated version, and then in April 2025 we did get an approved contract for Planet Geo to do the canopy study and the tree inventory that we're going to talk about tonight. So we were successful in getting that budget for that FY 24-25. So excited for the results. I'm excited that they're here for you. I know you guys have been waiting for them. And with that, I am going to hand it off to Jacob.
Well, good evening, Commissioners. Larger crowd than usual, so this is exciting. So to start, we'll go over the work that was conducted for the tree canopy assessment. So here's some background information about what is a tree canopy assessment. So this is a land cover study where aerial imagery is analyzed and determine a percentage of existing tree canopy, which provides a baseline for future analysis. The key goals that were part of this included quantifying the tree canopy and other land use types, measuring the ecosystem services provided by the tree canopy to the community, identifying areas where tree canopy can be expanded, determining priority areas for tree preservation and planting initiatives, and then providing data that informs future planning and establishing goals. So the methodology for this work included using high-resolution multispectral imagery from 2022 and Earth-defined data that distinguished 6th class land cover data for tree canopy and other land cover types. So these images here provide some reference to those land cover types and what they look like from an aerial perspective. Some distinctions between these includes the identification of trees as a darker, denser foliage that have canopies exceeding 12 feet and have more uniformity. There's shrubs that exhibit lighter colors and are short and irregularly shaped that blend with the grasses. There's also non-canopy vegetation like grasses and open spaces with no trees, bare soils where plant material is dried or died out, impervious surfaces like paved areas and buildings, and then areas with water. So the analysis included identifying potential planting areas in spaces that were already classified as vegetation. Unsuitable planting areas were manually delineated by staff and included recreational fields, agricultural lands, and state-owned properties. The results of the tree canopy assessment found that the city's boundary encompasses about 1,700 acres, land acres, where about 25% of that area was covered by tree canopy, and about 14% was identified as suitable for planting. And you'll see in the image, there's all those land cover types and kind of gives you an overall perspective of the whole city. So this pie chart provides a percentage breakdown of each land cover classification, and then something to note was that 21% of the existing tree canopy is currently overhanging impervious surfaces, and increasing the tree canopy over those paved areas would help reduce urban heat, stormwater runoff, noise, and air pollution throughout the city. This image here provides a visual example of the potential planting areas throughout the city. I'll hold there just so you can take a look at it. Gives you an overall perspective. And now, when analyzing the potential planting areas where there were specific locations around the city that resulted in really high and really low amounts. So high levels of potential planting was found in the north, northeast, and south, which totaled 252 acres of planting area. And the highest potential planting area was in the neighborhood north of East Napa Street, which you can see in this image, which is displayed there. The neighborhood holds 23% of the city's total potential planting area, which is a pretty high amount. The low levels of planting were found in the east and southwest. The neighborhood north of Sonoma Valley High School only has a potential planting area of about 13 acres, while the area in the southwest only has about 15 acres. So it's approximately 0.06% of the total plantable space in Sonoma, and compared to the previous location. So a number of assessment boundaries were utilized to make the informed decisions on how we would go about recommendations for the future. These included looking at it from the scope of the city limits, the sphere of influence, priority conservation areas, fire hazard severity zones, city properties. There's a hexagon-shaped form, census block groups, and then we'll be focusing on the census block groups for this presentation. But the other assessment boundaries are further discussed in the report. So using the census block groups, it was found that the average tree canopy across all groups was 37 acres. And the groups with 25% or higher tree canopy were found in the north and east. The lower groups were with less than 20% canopy were found in western Sonoma. The average plantable area was 21 acres throughout, but 3 census block groups had 30 acres or more of plantable area and were found along the city boundaries on the north and southeast. And in regard to city-owned properties, the city manages about 175 acres of land, and of which 75 of those acres were identified with tree canopy. This means that the average canopy cover on these properties is over 40%. But the total plantable area on these properties is approximately 65 acres, so an average of 22%. And as part of this review, it was also found that 40% of the city properties have more than 20% impervious cover, which kind of poses some limitations on future planting. And then looking at the hexagonal assessment boundary, it provides a kind of like a unique characterization of the existing tree canopy, as well as the plantable space using a uniform grid that kind of ignores the administrative boundaries that we currently have. You'll see that through the hexagon, it represents approximately 2 acres, and it paints a slightly different picture than the other assessment boundaries when it comes to the percentages of plantable areas. I'll hold it there so you can see the difference between the two. These maps kind of show a different view than what you would see in the other analysis. So next we'll go ahead and discuss the tree inventory. So what is a tree inventory? This is a comprehensive analysis that was conducted by ISA certified arborists on the ground. They created a record for each tree and compiled it into an online platform that could be used for maintenance in the future. Each tree record includes its location, a photograph, common and Latin names, the trunk diameter at 4.5 feet, estimated tree height and spread, its overall health, maintenance needs that it may need, and then some other recommendations as well. So the key goals for this were to quantify the amount and location of tree canopy, measuring the ecosystem services that were provided by the tree canopy overall, identifying potential planting areas, and confirming them also by having someone on the ground. It helps us confirm what's there. Also determining priority areas for preservation and planting, and then providing data for the future planning as well. So the tree inventory resulted in a total of 183 tree species. The top 10 species were found to comprise 60% of that total, and with 555 common crepe myrtles taking up 10% of that total inventory. So the other species with the highest counts included the London plane tree and southern magnolia. And when analyzing the size distributions, we found that the large trees with a diameter of more than 6 inches made up the majority of all trees. And while the number of large diameter trees is consistent with the ideal percentages, the number of smaller diameter trees showed that it had less than ideal percentage for ones that were between 0 and 6 inches, and then more than ideal percentage for those between 6 and 18 inches. And I'll have a diagram for that in just a second. So this pie chart here gives you a perspective of all the types of trees that were found in the inventory, with 33% being other species. And then this is the graph that kind of gives you a visual representation of those diameters and whether they meet the ideal percentage or not. And so you'll see that for the ones between 0 and 18 inches, they're slightly unaligned with the ideal percentage, but the other ones that are larger do meet that expectation. There we go. So the inventory provided helpful details about the tree conditions and maintenance to further protect the city's urban tree canopy as well. This was found that most trees were in good condition, which makes up 71%, or about 3,600 of the trees of the whole inventory. So only 0.22% of trees were found to be in critical condition, and then 3.41% were found in poor condition. This also coincides with the recommended maintenance that 96% of the trees were inventoried as needing pruning, and only about 1% were categorized as needing removal. So overall, the information that was gathered during the tree inventory is going to help provide key details for future planning and help us with creating recommendations. So this report gave us an analysis of the results and how that impacts the city. It was found that the existing canopy provides over $547,000 annually in avoided infrastructure costs, and removes about 300 pounds of carbon monoxide, 1,500 pounds of nitrogen dioxide, and then other pollutants from the air as well. As discussed earlier, the total urban canopy amounts to 25% of the entire city, with 14% of the city's area being available for planting. And then it was found that one of the challenges that we recognize is going to be the total area of unsuitable land for planting, which makes up 60% of the total land area. And these are kind of the ultimate results that we got from this whole analysis. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to the Director of Parks and Director of Parks and Rec, Dave Jones.
Thanks, Jacob. Good evening, commissioners. Nice to see all of you. Nice to meet some of you. My name is Dave Jans. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Sonoma. So after you've reviewed the materials in front of you and Jacob's gone through the overview, we want to talk about what comes next, right? Now that we have all of this information, all of this data, how do we put it to use? And so what I'm going to start off with is going through some of the recommendations that come directly from the report, working with our consultant, working with our staff team, and then take that down a level of how we may implement that really on the ground, both in near-term and in long-term opportunities. So directly from the report, some of the recommendations are to target high-priority planting areas. And so we have different ways that we can break down the data. As you saw, we have census blocks, or it can be broken into different areas of town. And so what we want to look at as we look to replant is focusing on areas that have lower canopy but are in the prioritized planting areas. And so the intent, as you'll see here, is rather than us always looking at, especially in response to a tree removal, if a tree is removed because it's not in an ideal location, what we can now do is look at community-wide. So we can say, rather than maybe this area wasn't the ideal location for that tree, so we're going to replant and increase our canopy community-wide, even if it's not specifically in that area. And we can also make sure that we're taking a look at things from an equitable standpoint across the board. We want to expand and diversify the public canopy. So we're looking at the recommendations of the various trees, utilizing our master tree list and other recommendations to make sure that we are putting in future plantings that best fit our needs now and into the future for trees. The third recommendation is to integrate these canopy goals into our city planning and policy. And so what we want to do is make sure that we are continuing to challenge ourselves, but that this is achievable. And so, again, rather than be reactive, we want to be proactive and set ourselves up for goals for what we want to see as our overall canopy throughout the city, and make sure that we set ourselves both up from a planning standpoint but a budgetary standpoint to be able to achieve those goals. Enhanced jurisdictional engagement, and that could also be cross-jurisdictional engagement. So utilizing resources and organizations and data that's already in place, we have the ability to work with our partners both in city limits, but also in our sphere of influence throughout the valley to help achieve a more robust canopy and impact our community members directly by leveraging the resources that are available to us. And then an important component is continuing to monitor, evaluate, and report on this progress. We know this is a key step to get to this point, to have this data in front of us, but this is a snapshot, right? This is a snapshot of the data that we have right here in front of us. You know, some of it's from aerial images in 2022, and we know as soon as that report comes off the press, it's already outdated. So we have to continue to monitor. And one key tool that we're receiving from this is going to be a GIS database. So what we'll be able to do is, as we go through the process of planting more trees, maintaining trees, and then since we have to remove trees, we can document that in real time, and that will let us stay on top of our management plan moving forward. So next steps. Now that we have the report, step one is here tonight. We want to present the information to you all. We want to present the information to the community. We want to hear your feedback. We know that this initiative started right here with you all as commissioners, and so it's taken a lot of work to get to this point, so we want to hear from you. We'll incorporate feedback, and then the next step after that is we'll take this to the city council. Right now we're targeting meeting in February to take the information to them and to hopefully, after we incorporate feedback, to adopt both of these reports and start utilizing them as actionable tools. Once adopted, what we will do, and as we're actively doing, is analyzing these findings and incorporate them into our ongoing tree maintenance and management plans. And so right now we are already on, we use the plaza, for example. We've set out a tiered process to make sure that we are not only responding to hazardous trees, but we're actively pruning and staying in front of potential risks and making sure that we're staying on top of the health of those trees. So what we want to do is take the data that we have from working with our contracted arborist, Mr. Meserve, as well as our local tree companies who help maintain those trees, and make sure that the plan we're on coincides with the data here. And if there's any discrepancies, we want to make sure that we sort that out and build that into our management plan directly. This report, both reports, will be used to inform future studies, budgetary decisions, project planning, daily maintenance operations, and your commission work plans. I'll show you a document here in a moment that you all came up with as a joint commission back in 2024, and we want to keep that active and moving forward. And so we want to use this data to help you in your work as commissioners. And then finally, we'll utilize these findings, recommended actions, and strategies to create an actionable implementation plan. You've heard me say that a few times, but that's important to us. We want to make sure these aren't studies that we just reference 5 years down the road and say, that was a nice thing we did in 2025. We want to make sure that we put the actions to use and that these reports stay fluid and that we continue to update them. So I referenced that document, so you may recall, some of you, I know were here for it, so others have joined, but in January 24, we had a joint commission meeting, and this body came up with a list of prioritized actions. Some of those are in progress, some are items that can be accomplished now that we have this data in front of us. Some of this will have to be more on the long range as we filter it into other opportunities, planning opportunities, and work plans. But I do want to point out that there's a handful of things that have been accomplished to date. A lot of it has to do with the work that you've done as commissioners. So first and foremost, following that, there was an interest in creating and publishing a master tree list. That's been done. It's been adopted by council. I'll point out in a future slide, just because it was adopted doesn't mean that work doesn't stop. Again, we want to make sure that we are planting the right species of trees in the right location. So that is intended to be an ongoing document that has the ability to be modified as commissioners, community, and staff see opportunities to either add species or remove species from that list based on how well they'll do in our ever-evolving environment. Item number 2, update the tree inventory and canopy study. Here we are. We're almost there. I put a check next to it because we're presenting it tonight, but we know we're not quite there adopted, but we know this is a big item to help move a lot of the other items forward. We continue to update the web materials. This obviously will become a larger task and more robust opportunity to update the materials once we have more data, but we intend to share the results of the study online, make sure that these are accessible for the public, and as I shared before, there's going to be an interactive tool where members of the public can get online, interact with the GIS database, see the status of trees both in public and in the public right-of-way in real time. And we're continuing, I would say we're actively looking for opportunities to fund implementation of planting and maintenance of trees. And what I mean by that is we've worked with a few partners here in the last several months, and we have the opportunity, a couple of organizations have come forward that are interested in donating some trees to help us with planting initiatives. We are constantly looking for grant opportunities to support both the recommendations in this study as well as supporting things like our priority conservation areas. So we'll continue to actively look for grant and funding mechanisms to help move these recommendations forward. So next, what I'm going to move to is a couple of slides of ways that some concepts that we've come up that we can potentially implement some of the recommendations. So taking them from high level and really start to utilize them. Again, we want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your recommendations. We know this isn't a comprehensive list, but these are ways that we can take the data and put them into action. So as I mentioned before, we want to compare, analyze this data to what we already have on file. We've done several tree reports. We know that there's been individual departments that have worked on monitoring and managing our trees, so we want to take this data, compare it to it, and make sure that our daily operations are on track and that our short-term management plans are in alignment with the recommendations of this plan. And we want to incorporate that into our regular tree maintenance schedule, again, prioritizing those high planting areas that have low canopy, and again, we're trying to reduce some of those climate offsets by reducing heat urban islands. We want to focus in on regulation and policy. So utilizing this data to inform, standardize, and update our tree removal permit process. And so what we're trying to do is, whether that's a private tree, a tree on a public land, a tree that's part of a development, make it a very streamlined process for people that would like to submit, and also give a key set of curriculum so that the governing body that's deciding right now that lives with the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission, they have a clear set of criteria of how they determine whether a tree should or shouldn't be removed, and then in turn what is the replacement process, and then how we monitor and enforce that replacement process. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to continue to review and modify that master tree list as necessary. Just a few more here. Again, ongoing planning and monitoring. And so We want to establish as commissions, as a community, as a staff, what our overall target is. Again, we want that to be challenging, but we want that to be achievable, our target of an urban tree canopy citywide. So what are our goals and how do we reach that? By building out the proper budgetary resources and staffing resources to meet that goal. We're going to utilize the tools that we both already exist, as well as this new GIS database, to make sure that we are tracking plantings, removals, maintenance of those trees, so we can make informed decisions down the line, and making sure that we're reporting back to you all as commission and the council on the progress. Again, we want to make sure this doesn't stop here once adopted, but this is a continued process. A key component of this, if we really want community-wide buy-in, is to get the community involved. And so we want to make these resources available. We'd like to see community members understand the importance of these tools, how they can utilize them at home, how they have resources available to them on proper tree care, proper tree species, so that if they are looking to plant or replant, they have those resources in front of them. And I think a key component of that is not just that they have the resources, but they understand the reason of why we're doing this, of why it's important to look at our overall tree canopy, why we're studying our tree inventory, and that decisions that they make as an individual homeowner, a business owner, as a park user, impacts the greater community as a whole, not just their individual property. So we want to work to make sure that we have the proper education materials on our website, but also that we're doing constant and regular outreach, hopefully getting involvement from our schools, service clubs, and other organizations in town. And one other element we want to talk about is how we take this into the long term. And so one opportunity that we have in front of us is to take this data and build that into something called an urban forest management plan. Some of you may be familiar with that concept, others may not. And so there's a lot of details to it. This is kind of a high-level summary, but we have the opportunity to take this information that's in front of us and either you work with a consulting company such as Planet Geo to help build this out. If not, we can tackle some of these initiatives in-house. It just may take longer and might not be quite to the same level as working with someone like an outside consultant. But some of the benefits that I just want to point out of going down the line of an urban forestry management plan is it creates a community-wide standardized process of how we care and respond to our trees as a whole. And so it allows us to look at our street trees, our park trees, our individual trees, and we have a set of standards and criteria of how we manage them, how we handle removal requests, and how we handle long-term maintenance. And so from a staff operational standpoint, it really standardizes our process for pruning, removal, inspection, really allows us to have a good focus on our long-term risk management, how we're looking at managing our mature trees versus newly planted trees, and also provides guidance for years when we're dealing with drought or unexpected stress on those trees. It really sets a long-term plan for our tree system citywide. It supports us with policy and planning. So it takes the data that we have here and builds that into more defined recommendations, defined roles and responsibilities for decision making, again, which bodies will make decisions on how our trees are governed, and really will guide our updates to ordinances such as our heritage tree ordinance or our tree removal process. And finally, really brings, once again, the community into that decision-making process and that education process. So it provides information to those community members on the reasons for why we're doing this and gets buy-in from them, and hopefully gets them to support our process as well. So that's something that we have an opportunity to take this as the next step, is to take our information now and build it into a long-term management plan that I think would benefit both staff, commission, policymakers, as well as the community as a whole. And so that's an overview of our immediate recommendations and potential ways that we can implement. Again, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback. And so with that, the three of us as staff are happy to answer questions, and we'll turn it back over to you to take to field questions and any public comments you like.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you, Jacob, for your presentations this evening. And to Dave's point about community engagement, it would be my preference, unless there's objection from members of the commissions, that we go to public comment first to allow the handful of members of the public who are in the audience to speak without undue impact to the rest of their evenings. The balance of the room is a little imbalanced, I should say. There's far more commission members up here who already have microphones than there are members of the public. So with that, if there's no objection, I will open public comment as it relates to this agenda item and welcome any members of the public to come forward who are wishing to address the commissions on this topic. Seeing none. Mr. Menifee, come forward, state your name, please.
Good evening. Thank you for your presentations. Mike Menifee, 380 Church Street. I'm just wondering, I just have a question. How does this replanting fold in with CAL FIRE's fire hazard zones?
Good question, and that will be one of mine. And I have a feeling that that will be a discussion topic, so
Okay.
I'd welcome you to stay. And my comments earlier were not intended to force anyone out the door, just to give you the opportunity to speak before we all do. So
Yep.
I'm sure that topic will be covered.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you all.
Caitlin, thank you.
Good evening. Caitlin Cornwall, representing Sonoma Ecology Center. A lot of great work here. Really fun to see this. Just after all this time, sort of, rise to the level and have all these people looking at this information. It's great. Trees are really important for the quality of life of everyone in the city. And I think Richard and I were just talking about the report, and really the only comment that we have is that there's a whole other set of benefits that trees can bring that seems to be completely missing from the report, and even the estimate of the monetary contributions that trees make to the city, which is the contribution of trees toward habitat for wildlife, birds, and the insects that create the entire food web that enables birds to survive here. So this is a whole additional set of benefits that can be had by the city in its tree plans with no additional expense. It really, the point would be to add some of the literature about that set of benefits to the report. Douglas Tallamy has an entire huge body of work, scientific work on this, the benefits of locally native trees and how many more birds they produce, for example, and pollinators, butterflies, etc. So, like, for example, it's very interesting that the existing tree list does not include coast live oak, does not include valley oak. Those are the most common, easy to obtain, fast growing, very tough species that should be really near the top of the list. And similarly, the tree benefits diagram on page 33 doesn't include any of these habitat or food web benefits. So we'd really like to see that, and also that you consider that when this comes around for policy, that the city should have a target for a percentage of its tree canopy that is locally native species for all the benefits that brings. And there's no loss, you can plant a crepe myrtle sized tree that's native and it will do all the things a crepe myrtle does and a bunch more. So that's our main comment. And we'd be happy to work with the city in any way on these topics. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to? Mr. Menifee, come forward.
Qualify my question.
As long as you're behind a microphone, sir.
I think that I'm feeling like I'm being misinterpreted.
Oh.
Mike Menifee again. I grew up in the state park system, so I'm like the Lorax. I love trees. I grew up literally from 1 month old until my father retired in 1988 in the state park system. I also work in the state park system. I love trees. I'm just wondering how this all interrelates with each other.
100%. Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to come forward and address the commissions on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and I will bring it back to the commissions. Staff, do you have any recommendations? What would be easiest for you procedurally as to how you would like to field comments and questions? Would you like to go by commission? Okay.
Let's go by commission, and then you can combine questions and comments for each person, and let's do one round per person that wants to participate through each commission, and then if we have additional comments and questions after everybody gets one chance, then let's come back around and do it again, if that works. That way, one commission isn't taking the majority of the meeting or anything.
Understood, and maybe logically we would start with questions.
You can combine them if I have a feeling some thoughts are part
Well-
of questions.
Okay, that sounds good. Is everybody on the same page? Okay. Let's go by commission. Selfishly, we'll start with the planning commission. Any members of the planning commission? Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you. This has been a long time coming, and I'm delighted to see it. Discussions about the reality of our urban forest have gone back, well, at least a decade or two. And so here we are. Both the technology has caught up with the desire of the city to do this and enabled it to do it in a way that we weren't able to do in the past, which is great. The idea of having a GIS interactive map that identifies everything is fabulous. So I'm delighted to see this come forward. One question I had was this urban tree canopy study did or did not include trees in backyards. In other words, there was one study which was the aerial study, which I assume was global, and that one would catch all the trees and provide a canopy result. The actual tree counts, however, and the cataloging of the individual trees, am I correct in understanding that that did not include trees in rear yards?
That is correct. It did not. So we needed to, we had a 5,000 tree limit that we were trying to stick to within a week. And so we focused primarily on public right-of-way and adjacent to or back of sidewalk areas. And so when the GIS, when we make it live, you'll see a lot of dots, and that's where the focus of over 5,000 trees is.
Okay, and I would just broadly assume that that count of 5,000 is either 50% or 100% greater if we take in the area that wasn't specifically counted.
Correct. So the canopy study looks at, because it's looking from aerial, but I would say potentially even more than the 5,000, because we were at first doing within like the first 15 feet, and we only got through one small zone, and we hit over 1,000 in like a day. And so they were like, we need to step back if you want to actually look at your parks. So we're
Okay.
going to be way over the double.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of comments. It seems to me that the process that we've engaged in here essentially consists of certain segments that are connected to each other, but that comprise a whole system of how we work with this information and work with the public to implement it. Step one is for the city to clearly delineate and establish regulations, many of which we've already done, in terms of responsibility for trees, when an individual property owner with a tree that is impacting the public right away, for example, needs to have some work done. What's the responsibility of the property owner and role of the property owner in that? And are the people who are going to do the work well educated as to what the city specific requirements are? So you've got the regulate portion, then you've got the educate portion, which isn't just about, you know, the health of trees and how to preserve them and the best way to care for them. The other part of the educate is what are the regulations and how do we bring people's attention to the fact that there are regulations about trees. I don't think most homeowners in this city, frankly, if asked, would be able to tell you what they're allowed or not allowed to do. And we need to improve that education portion of it. And that then brings up the issue of communication. So there's the three-part: regulate, educate, and communicate. The communication part is also challenging. It can't be just a matter of putting things on a website. If this is going to become a real effort on the part of the community, the communication is going to have to be broader than simply having an information conduit that the city tells people, if you want to find out about trees in Sonoma, here's where you go. I'm not suggesting what the breadth of it or the construction of that communication process would be, but there is the opportunity for the production of printed pamphlets and guides that can be distributed, for example, to new homeowners. A fair proportion of the houses turn over in Sonoma every year. New homeowners come in. This should be part of a new homeowner package, which is some information about what their responsibilities are. So I'd like to see effort into the definition of what a communication program would be. The other two things I just want to mention is that you mentioned heritage trees in your presentation. I've been talking about the heritage tree program for the 35 years I've been involved in city business. Our heritage tree ordinance is basically nothing. I'm not even sure if we've even named one heritage tree, but if we have, it's just one. And the reason for that is it doesn't mean anything. So I am a strong supporter of the idea of a heritage tree program, but only if it means something. And to me, what it means is that an individual homeowner has a tree of such significance that they are prepared to, in the deed of their property, come to an agreement about the treatment of that tree into the future. That subsequent purchases of that property, when they buy that property, are subject to the terms of the heritage tree agreement that is made in terms of the kind of care that will be given to a tree and its preservation. I know we have a higher proportion of very large trees than are optimal, but not really. We can't have too many very large trees. We just don't have enough not very large trees. So the very large trees, which comprise, I think, a invaluable and irreplaceable part of Sonoma's heritage, need to be included in this vehicle. My envisioning of a heritage tree ordinance is that the city would begin to look at the potential of allocating money to offset the costs of maintaining a tree properly that is the responsibility of a homeowner but is a heritage tree. That if the city wants to get homeowners to say, we'd like to nominate this tree as a heritage tree, and if they're willing to give up some of the freedom that they might have otherwise had, there has to be something in compensation to them for that. And my view is that what's in compensation to that is that a fund be established to help offset the cost of what it really requires to maintain or properly prune a 200 or 400-year-old oak tree that's 4 feet in diameter and hangs mostly over the street. And the city ought to be prepared to invest in the preservation of that tree through the heritage tree ordinance. Then the last thing I want to bring up is something else I didn't see in this at all, which is there's a lot of reference to planting more trees. Totally support planting more trees. I think it would be great. And I like the idea of looking at where we need them or where we don't have them and how we can accomplish that. I'd like to see that intermixed with the potential for what I refer to loosely as greenway creation. Looking at our circulation plan, looking at our circulation element, looking at the areas of the city which are not just transportation corridors, but recreational zones for people where pedestrians walk, where the quality of moved dramatically by an overall greenway plan that might even change the configuration of the street or the sidewalks or create bulb outs or do other things that promote opportunities to create, and this is the key, planting in these impermeable surface areas. I think if we address these impermeable surface areas as not void of any potential, but actually with redesign and thoughtful configuration and opportunity to be a planting area, we can offset some of the heat island effects in some of these areas, create a more pleasant pedestrian experience and biking experience in Sonoma, not just on existing bike paths, but looking to create greenways in areas that have been neglected, that really don't have anything now. And those are largely going to be impermeable surface areas. I think we need to examine that more tightly. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the Planning Commission? Commissioner Willers, please.
First comment, great presentation. Nice to have the report. The one comment that I would like to make is maybe we can invite the public to participate in the tree count and identification. I know the canopy captured a lot of trees, and I visited GIS. I saw little dots, and I realized that a significant portion of the trees that are even within what I would call the public right-of-way, not out inside fences, but along streets, along private drives, simply don't exist. I understand the limitation. But I know, for myself, the small community that I live in, I'd be happy to send in what those are. And I think there are a lot of people on their private properties that would participate in just saying, yeah, that's a walnut tree, and yeah, my backyard tree is a maple, So if you can get them, that just collects more data without any expense to the city, and lets people invest in the idea that we have a canopy that promotes all the qualities that we enjoy. I want to second Commissioner Barnett's comments about heritage trees. I think the largest trees that we have in our community are the most significant from a ecological standpoint, and whether they're privately owned or in a public space, they were here far before, probably before Vallejo was here, obviously, and they should be treated as that, and some kind of incentive by the city to that tree owner now should be provided to maintain its health. And then lastly, as Caitlin mentioned, the type of tree that we choose to plant in the public realm, and I call the public realm private parking lots required to have trees, that were required to have trees during their use permit, and those trees have been neglected and no enforcement has been taken over time. I think we really need to reevaluate our enforcement over, it's great for us to require them during the use permit process. I feel it's neglect for us not to enforce the lack of care of them during what we would expect to be the lifespan of a tree, to provide the kind of not only visual aesthetic element that a tree provides, but the ecological elements that the tree provides, the shading of the parking lot, which is really the intent of it, and the absorption of the water that then can nurture that tree. And so, as I mentioned 2 years ago, I think parking lots need to be paid attention to as potential urban forest land. And the way in which we have to drain parking lots currently provide a perfect opportunity to do those two things at once, to provide a stable environment for a tree to be planted in a parking lot, to reduce the effects of the urban heat island, and to provide a visual and aesthetic benefit for that parking lot. So I see those impermeable areas as potentially significant areas for a reforestation of the community, rather than leaving it as in a deforested state. So those are my primary comments.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the Planning Commission? Donna?
Yes, I want to pile on some of these comments and ask that the city prioritize in their action plan this idea of greenways, of reclaiming some of the current urban areas like the parking lots, as well as realizing that the PCA areas are somewhat limited. And so again, ask the city try to continue to expand those areas. So for instance, the walking trail that was a train, the train track, that's not in the PCA area, but it's a potential for a greenway. So really put a plan together to prioritize those. And also getting back to native species, I think a priority on planting native species, because there's also a benefit with regard to those when it comes to fire safety. And so I would ask the city to consider those as well.
Great, thank you. Teresa, anything to add?
Yes, I concur with all of my fellow commissioners, their comments that they've made. Specifically, I'm asked every day by homeowners, what do I do with this tree? What can I do with this tree? Am I responsible for it? And I don't have the answers. So I think that's an area that we could focus on, and I really like Commissioner Barnett's idea of a new homeowners package. It would be incredibly helpful as these private properties transfer, that we can then give them, we can educate them, we can give them the tools and what they need to do, and for them to take responsibility for the care of those. There's a lot of developments. Developments with homeowners associations, et cetera, that were required to put in X amount of trees, and then we never looked back to see if they were ever taken care of. And we see that now when these properties trade, it's like, whoa, what can I get? What is that? And it's in disrepair, and what can I do with it? So that would be an area I think would be very beneficial to the community for the private homeowners.
Thank you, Commissioner Nugent. The new homeowner packet is a good concept. Maybe we can do it electronically so that we don't have to kill any more trees in the process. I'll just say generally that this study is overdue, and it's provides much more of a concrete foundation for decision making than we've had in the past. Just beyond anecdotal assessments. I think the documentation of the tree conditions, size, location improves transparency and helps to inform decision making around these things. I appreciate that in this case the consultant didn't rely solely on generic assumptions, but evaluated, pretty site-specific conditions. And it definitely serves as a good baseline and a snapshot of current conditions, which is essential for future tracking. But it does naturally, raise questions about how this is going to translate into policy. And I'm interested to Mr. Menefee's earlier point about the convergence of sometimes competing environmental and ecological interests in wildfire mitigation, fuel reduction, water conservation, and reforestation, and how all those things can harmoniously work together and find policy direction that complements and speaks to each one of those interests. So I think I'll pass the microphone to Mr. Morrill to call on his commission.
Do you want me to answer part of that question?
Absolutely, thank you.
And then I'll pass it to Chair Morrell. So in the document itself, starting around page, I think I looked at it, 25, 26, we had a whole section. We actually asked for this section because we understand that that is important. They have never done this in their canopy studies before. So it's something that they did some research on and added. I will say that it's just a highlight. And it's really just highlighting what's the difference between the zones that we have within the city. So again, very high fire, and then we have high fire and moderate. Very high fire is the area that really has more of the considerations and requirements around defensible space versus moderate and high, or more of like suggested defensible space buffers, and especially around structures. I have requested that the Sonoma Valley Fire District, specifically Trevor, will do a presentation probably in March, I'm looking at right now, where he will specifically do we'll do a joint presentation for the community as a whole, to talk about what does this mean for us, since the fire maps are a brand new thing for our community. And so he'll talk more about the defensible space. They have in here as well, we've linked to the documents that are on Sonoma Valley Fire District on defensible space, and their recommendations around creating buffers around your house. And so we'll highlight those, and then we'll also talk about some of the building code aspects of being in fire zones now. So I did want to highlight, it is something that we are looking at. We are wanting to probably update more in our tree list, take into consideration more of, okay, if you're in the very high fire, definitely don't plant these. You know, those types of considerations will add into when we look at the list, and then some other qualities. It is like we were talking about, as Director Jan said, this is ongoing. So this is, right now, this is what we have, but we will continue to work on it and update it as we learn more, and create materials around it, especially around those that live specifically in that very high fire zone. Because as you probably noted, a lot of our plantable area is in that very high fire zone. So we are looking closely at what that means.
Great, thanks for answering that question. And I hope my comments didn't come across as critical. I appreciate very much that the study did contemplate that, and I read it. And I'm glad that we were talking about how these maybe sometimes competing aspects of ecology are going to fit together. Thank you. I will pass it to
I'll go ahead, sure.
Chair Rowe.
Thank you. You won't be surprised to know I have a number of comments, but before I launch into them, I'd like to defer to my fellow members of the Climate Action Commission for their comments, and then I'll wrap up at the end of those comments with some notes that I have. Amber, would you like to kick it off?
I appreciate this discussion between all of us. It's a long time coming. It's so exciting, and I really like how much support we have in wanting to drive this to the community and get community support and community action in it. That has been, I think, a sticking point for a lot of us in our commission, of wanting the public to really feel impassioned and involved in different things that we are doing, because they all love our trees too, but they don't really know what's possible, what's not possible, what these trees actually mean to us as well. So I think it'll be great that we come up with something. Little plug that we are trying to work on something for Earth Day, so I'm putting these in the back of my head too, to see what's possible to come up with for an Earth Day resource day as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Leo, comments?
Leo McCloskey of the Climate Action Committee. Let's see, we're going to have some comments coming from Tom Conlon. We worked on looking at the tree list, and we looked at the list of plant materials that were recommended. And no offense, but Ms. Mazurka was working on, that were brought to the Parks and Recreation Department. And one thing I could say is I'm a PhD chemical ecologist from a plant group at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And what's happening with, whether it's grapes, where I have a lot of expertise, or with urban forestry, is we want to look for trees that are benchmarked in another region that is identical in temperature to what we have here. And that's called the optimum temperature. The trees that we have and the decorative trees that were brought in, including the crepe myrtle, which is a pretty adaptable tree, but say magnolias would be kind of an odd tree to have in Sonoma, but we have them. They're in the prevalent list. That what we could be looking for are trees that are more coming from our identical temperature. One example would be Johannesburg, South Africa. In Johannesburg, the British have had an empire, and they have botanical institutes that are really well organized, and trees are moving in from Burma and in South Africa and the former Commonwealth countries in a very organized fashion. They're arriving in the Central Valley of California for the nurseries. And for example, Podocarpus icy blue is being used by one of the major companies that are landscape architects here in the area. And I've planted those. I've replanted my garden to new plant materials with the optimum temperature of this valley, and they really thrive. And the amount of water they use is maybe less than half of what I had before. And so I think it's worth looking at this list and finding, raising the bar and getting away from the old natural history collections that are at the University of California at Berkeley and at Davis, which have been looking at the natural plants, but they're not trees. They're not permaculture, which is what we're looking for here, permaculture. And what happens when you get the right temperature, the tree from the right temperature, is the amount of water used by the system dramatically drops. Grapes, which I know very well, use about 1 million gallons of water per acre. So you can imagine that trees are using on that order of magnitude of water. And as the water table is dropping here in the city, the amount of water that these trees are going to be able to tap into is dropping. And so it's really nice to get the optimum temperature tree to bring into the region and upgrade that list that we have so that we reduce the amount of water and we get the same amount of canopy cover for half the water. So I think that's what we're looking for. That's what's happening in the wine industry. We're looking for new varieties in California that will replace Chardonnay. How many people drink Chardonnay? Well, in the future, there's going to be another grape. It's probably going to be Vermentino, which has a higher temperature that's the temperature in Italy. And that temperature is the new temperature in California. So the old cool climate grapes, the old cool climate trees are going away. A cool climate, live oak that is here along the coast is no longer going to work in Napa. It will still work here, but we're going to see more valley oaks coming in here, things like that. So just that kind of thinking, and no criticism to anything. It's just we're relying on existing information from the past, where the temperature is higher. Say in 1950, it's about 3 degrees higher now, centigrade. And so most of the plant ideas that we have for California probably won't work. The oaks are excellent, and they have owls. They would maintain the bird systems. Those are a really good tree for Sonoma. So just some other thinking out of the box, a little maverick thinking.
Thank you, Leo. John, comments?
Yeah, just to double down on what Leo says and the ecology center, I think it's very important to really consider planting native species that have the most amount of good for the most amount of native animals that share this area with us. I know I live close to where the Starling is, over on the west side of town, and I was a park ranger and a guide for about 30 years, and so I'm very attuned to what the sounds of the birds are outside my window. And just in the 9 years that I've lived here, the bird sounds have drastically changed. I don't know what the studies are that are ongoing in this area, but, you know, we have changing populations of commonly seen animals going on around us all the time right now. So I think that's something that's worth taking into consideration. Also want to say, I don't know to what extent the study in terms of plantable space has considered like the damage to infrastructure, to sidewalks and streets, in terms of where to plant trees, or how trees are removed because of damage to sidewalks and streets. You know, I see that a lot in my neighborhood where I am. We have a lot of damage to the streets, to the asphalt, sidewalks, whole blocks of the sidewalks coming up, and, you know, they sometimes are never repaired. And I mean, I've tripped over the same bit of sidewalk over and over again, to my dismay. But, and it's all, you know, because of the kind of tree or how close the tree was planted to where the sidewalks were going to be. So I don't know if that fits into your calculus, like in terms of plantable space, like where our infrastructure is, including like, you know, gas and electric lines and sewer pipes that need to be managed with all the utilities.
Thank you. Philip, some thoughts on your part?
Really, the conversation has been really good. There's very little to add other than I too drink Chardonnay and Vermentino, and I'm anxious to hear what our chair and vice chair have.
I'm not at all surprised by that. Thank you, Philip, with your French background.
Thank you. There's a lot of us tonight, a lot of comments, and I agree with just about everybody's comments so far. It might be helpful to have the PDF of our agenda packet, because some of the things I have to say might be helpful to illustrate with a picture. And the maps that I found in the canopy study in particular are most interesting and helpful. I have 4 pages of detailed notes that I won't bore everybody with tonight, but I do want to talk about high-level things, some of which my other fellow commissioners have touched on. First, to answer Caitlin's question, I think the Valley Oak and Coastal Live Oaks are about 10% of our existing inventory on page 11. It seemed to me that the inventory and the canopy had different objectives. The inventory struck me as having primarily like a public works oriented cost containment, cost fiscal management, and liability management perspective. And that's obviously something the city needs to pay attention to. But there are the other things that I think most of the commissioners around the table here have asked for. I want to be sure we don't end up going through this exercise and then only paying attention to just the bottom line questions. The size distribution analysis in the inventory, excluding the small diameter trees that are even in the near zone, skews that size diameter result. My takeaway, though, at looking at that is that City of Sonoma has actually a very healthy age grade of trees over the life cycle of trees, and we're lucky to have that. So what it shows in the table is that threshold, only the smallest trees are the ones that we are deficient in, but that's largely a factor or an artifact of undercounting those small trees just through our method. So back to the concept of what objectives we're trying to achieve. How important is canopy equity? I had a lot of questions in the inventory, and I wanted to see the inventory parsed by ownership type and maybe geography. I see that that's more captured in the canopy study when I read that later, but I question whether it wouldn't be too much to add those crosstabs to the inventory analysis, because then we would know where those current trees are of different sizes and species. And also to get back to that ownership responsibility, which leads to, is it the private landowner, the folks, on the planning commission have to deal with these things. When an individual comes forward and says, I want to take a tree down, it would be helpful to know where the inventory of trees are by ownership type. The clearance maintenance category that's described in the inventory is huge. And I'd like to see some sense of prioritization from our consultants before it gets turned over to the city. How do we propose attacking this massive problem of maintaining the trees we've already got? Half the 2,300, 2,500 trees that need to be maintained on a continuous basis. And so as a bicycle rider, I think about the ones that hit me in the face when I'm riding in the bike lane. But I know that there's sidewalk users, there's trees that could fall on me when I'm driving down the road. So I'd like to see some sense of prioritization recommendations in the final report. Do highways have a higher priority than arterials, or is there a jurisdictional problem there? I don't know. Leo talked about, and this is now switching mostly to the canopy study, the Kopengeiger, the fact that Sonoma is going to be transitioning from warm summers to hot summers. And the trees that we have now may not survive that, and we need to be planning toward that. We'll be doing a brief report at our Climate Action Commission next month from our ad hoc committee that he was making reference to. To the point that Larry brought up in his initial comments about private trees that are in the adjacency area, the picture, the map that's on page 32, I believe, might be most helpful for illustrating, and it's in the presentation as well. Is that okay? Maybe that went a little bit higher in the report, not 32, but maybe more 20, 24, 26. Okay, getting closer. So on this one here, this is where the trees are right now by census block, where the canopy is. And this strikes me as showing us that the upper northwest quadrant of the city has the least canopy. But as we get to the recommendations, we're showing that we want to have more trees on the east side, northeast, and southeast side of town, because that's where the plantable area is. And that begs the question, to me at least, of are we continuing to exacerbate canopy inequity that we currently see in the city if we lean into these recommendations as presented to us in the draft report? So I want to take a more careful look than I was able to do in just the narrative of the report at the algorithm used for the prioritization ranking in the canopy study, because some of the other variables besides this one of where the trees are now is really driving that analysis. And you're jumping down to the recommendations now? Is that where you were headed, or?
The algorithm.
Yeah, the picture of the algorithm, yeah. Which was pretty much it's illustrative, I think. But, yeah.
That is illustrative, but the sections that they're highlighting and talking about, these are all the variables that went into that algorithm.
That's right. And so the question I was having is, what are the weights, and how were we, is poverty rate being heavily, no, probably not, but actually I think there was a poverty study in one of those pictures, and it did show that. So I want to dig into that a little bit better to be sure that I understand what's being recommended here, and I encourage my fellow commissioners to do the same, because we don't want to continue to exacerbate the inequities of the city. Toward wrapping up, I'll just say there is a picture in here of the PCAs, the priority conservation areas, and I found it quite interesting that the northernmost PCA, of course, the built around the Rail to Trail program, is quite large, and obviously there's a lot of available plantable area up there, also in the very high fire severity zone. But this picture demonstrates to me that there are existing greenway passages through the city already, the Friar Creek Trail being a primary one, that doesn't have a lot of area. And so what seems to me to still be missing in the connectivity map here is a connection between Sonoma Creek and Friar Creek and Nathanson Creek. That is not at the crosstown. We need a midtown or a southern crossing connection. And that doesn't need to be a whole lot wider than the existing Friar Creek path is, in my opinion. So I'd like to try to work on that. And as you see in the inset expansion, we can get a lot of trees right at that periphery of the city ownership that do hang over the roads. And I don't think the existing study, they call those areas unplantable or infeasible for new planting. And I'm concerned that if we write grants, we're going to end up missing those individual opportunities if we don't make sure that that's in our policy, that we're looking to stick a tree on private property that's going to grow over the sidewalk and capture some canopy over an important passageway space. And I know that the city council members have talked about how hot it is to walk along Napa Street. There may be opportunities in the private businesses and residences along Napa Street to do just that and to give our main thoroughfare a lot more canopy cover. So sorry to take up so much time, but it is a great report, and it's wonderful to be able to dig into it at this draft stage. So thanks for consideration of my comments.
Thank you, Tom. We've come a long way from our early struggles to get trees on the agenda of the Climate Action Commission. I'm reminded of an early conversation that John Donnelly and I put together a grouping that some of the Brown Act issues were raised and so on, because we hadn't fully noticed it to the members of the public and so on, but we really were pushing for some serious thinking about trees, and lo and behold, look how far we've come. There's clearly a long way to come. Still, we have ideas now. Now we need implementation. We need action. Talk is cheap. Action isn't always so cheap, but it's terribly important. I was struck by the early comments about fire. We're in a high fire zone. We all remember those years. They weren't that long ago. And we need to be aware of the tree canopy issues as they relate to fire. My own home on the east side, we were canceled by our fire insurance company because they didn't like the fact that we have large trees whose canopies extend over the property. We all need to be aware of these issues and to integrate thinking about fire risk in our thinking about improving Sonoma's trees. Water issues from a climate perspective are critical. That water table is dropping. It's likely to continue to drop given climate issues and the lack of, in particular, federal government activity in any positive sense about water and climate issues. in these days, so yeah, I'm being political, and didn't surprise anybody who knows me. Looking at the study, there's a lot of good information, a lot of useful new information packaged fairly well for us. It needs, I think, from our point of view, a little bit more of a climate smart process of thinking this through. How do we relate these water and fire issues to being climate smart in our approach to trees? Better trees, more trees, bigger trees, trees in the right places, from a climate smart perspective. Comments earlier this evening about greenways, green links are terribly important. There's been some recent work done. I'm hoping at the next Climate Commission to have a presentation on that topic and looking at where we stand already in terms of nascent greenways, green links, and where we could go as we think about trees and climate smart Sonoma as a approach to all of this, as an integrating phenomenon, to pull it all together so that it's not just trees and it's not just water and it's not just worry about fire, but it's an integrated whole of these issues. That gets us to a climate smart tree plan and policy implementation. Having taught at the university level in planning classes, I would always start by saying, this is not a course about planning, it's a course about implementation. It's taking thinking and indeed plans and then implementing them, making a difference. So in that regard, I think we've come a long way. There's some excellent comments from our fellow commissioners this evening. I like the idea of heritage trees. I'm thinking about the mother oak at the Sonoma Garden Park as one of our heritage trees, and the need to keep her as healthy as we can, that mother oak, for as long as we can. And there are others in the city, and having them recognized and applauded and cared for properly is a great idea. And sort of earlier comments about enforcement strike me as something worthy of continuing attention. My impression about all the wonderful things that happen in the city of Sonoma and the processes we go through doesn't always put enforcement at the top of the agenda. Dogs on the Plaza is a good example, but there are many others. And I'm reminded of how important it was in my work as an official of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency when I worked for a living. Enforcement was a critical piece of what we accomplished when we had an effective U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and we'll have one again. But here at the city, let's keep in mind, plans are nice, pictures are nice, implementation and enforcement become critical of moving us where we need to be. In that regard, and just to wrap up, we've had some interesting discussions, and there's a little bit in the report potentially about a clustered forest in small scale called a Miyawaki forest. These came out of Japan. There have been some interesting initiatives in the last 2 years in the Berkeley area in the East Bay. We have some opportunities here in Sonoma. A couple of our city council members and I have looked at locations. I'd like to continue to push forward on that idea as well. These are rapid growing, climate focused forestry initiatives that could really begin to make a difference and to show everyone, including all of our residents, what we're doing. So with that, I'll conclude and turn it back over to my colleague to my left.
Chair Morrell, thank you very much, and members of the Climate Action Commission, thank you for your great input and commentary. And with that, I will turn the microphone to Vice Chair Tolbert of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission for commentary from your commission.
Thank you very much. I'd encourage the members of the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Commission to speak.
I want to compliment the city on doing this. It's a wonderful project, and So my comments are that I think community communication is very important. I think something could be done almost immediately, sending homeowners information with their water bill on their responsibilities for tree maintenance in their sidewalks. I think that's a very important thing. Almost no one I speak to understands that. And then they're surprised when they have to pay for permits and all the associated things to take out their trees. I was also very concerned about 27% of the top trees are not good for sidewalks, and I think that that's going to be an issue. Those would be London plane, which is so-so, but liquid amber, red maple, these are trees that push up the sidewalks and are potentially a huge cost for the homeowners and the city in the immediate future. Magnolia, of course. I live over on the east side where there's a number of magnolias, and the sidewalks are being pushed up, and I know that the commission has gotten several requests for change, you know, and I think that the proliferation of crepe myrtle is because they are manageable trees, and people look at that as no more sidewalk problems, and they're no huge expense trimming the trees. I think education is important, and one of the things that I'd like to suggest is that arborists be educated, and perhaps there can be a community certification program that assures the public, the city, that the trees are being pruned right, because there's some hilarious examples that happen around town, and that they're just quite amazing. Since I have the microphone, I want to remind people, they think of trees are associated with wildlife. There's a proliferation of uplighting of trees. People think that now that they have a tree and it has a trunk, that they want to uplight it, but it's devastating on owls and all kinds of insects, other birds. You know, there's a whole night crew that's out there when we're peacefully sleeping that are providing us with insects and other and the owls are out there looking for things. Imagine those headlights that are coming at you if you were looking for food instead of driving. That would be pretty unsettling. So I think that also I think there should be awareness of solar panels, that when people choose the size of their trees, that could be worked into this the suggestions, because it's an education process for everybody. Thank you.
Well, I am also very excited about the study, and incredibly excited that we're all meeting again after such a long time. I would love if we could figure out a way for our commissions to be able to communicate much more often, because as I interface with various commission members just out in the public, there are so many concepts. There's work that's being done. We don't know that the other commission's already doing it. A lot of the brainstorming that needs to happen. So I know we talked before about having different ways of commissions being able to communicate with each other, but I think to me it's urgent. And maybe we also need to be educated on how we can gather in accordance with the Brown Act. I mean, I think we were thinking that if each commission had less than a quorum, and we can have that group gather, that we were within the parameters, but apparently we were not. And so I think it's fairly urgent that we know how we can gather together. I was a little bit surprised for some reason that we didn't have a Planet Geo representative this evening. I'd like to know if we can ask them any specific questions about the science, et cetera. For example, echoing the concept of the microforest, the Miyawaki forests, which could be quite interesting for the low existing canopy areas, places where we can't have greenways, cannot have greenways in impervious areas. Part of that concept is to get each community where the microforest is going to be to have some skin in the game in which they help with the planning, and that gives them an investment in the outcome of these microforests. So, but what I couldn't tell by the maps is what is the square footage of some of these smaller areas that are considered impervious or not feasible. I mean, how big does a Miyawaki forest have to be in order to fit into some of these areas? I think we could get really creative. And one last thing I'll add is that, for what it's worth, at one point I did a quick study by contacting surrounding municipalities of what these municipalities are doing with their own tree ordinances, because our tree ordinance has some numbers from 1992, that's 34 years old. And the language is such that, to me, it's urgent, especially for these tree replacements, that we update those numbers in a way that at least comes up to a standard that these other municipalities have. I mean, our numbers are way off. They just don't compete with the standard. So that's it.
Good evening. I too am very pleased and welcome the progress we've made with this. I want to especially thank Jennifer for working with us all through this process and getting us to this point. And I appreciate the comments that have been made by the other commissioners. I'd like to, I mean, there's so many wonderful ideas here, but I'd like to focus a bit on the costs and benefits of this. Looking at the report, I see areas of cost that's maintenance of what we already have, including a lot of pruning that's recommended that we haven't been doing on most of the tree canopy. Then there's the enforcement cost. And then secondly, there's the recurring inventory assessment that the Planet Geo recommends, that not having done this inventory once, we should do it maybe annually or every other year to check on how we're doing in terms of progress and what needs to be adjusted in terms of priorities. And then there's the recommendation of new planting of trees, in which we all welcome that, to expand and diversify the canopy. So it hasn't been really addressed how we're going to pay for all this. And I think the other side of this is the benefits, that we've seen the eco benefits that are detailed in this report, and the estimates, even leaving out the backyard trees that Larry mentioned, that the annual benefit of our tree canopy is estimated at 547,000 plus, and each additional acreage of new planted trees is to add about $1,300 per acre. So it seems to me that we should focus on the benefits, build this outreach, communication, and education community, and see why we can hopefully raise money for this. And in that spirit, I've advocated before, and I think we should really look at this as reactivating the former city tree fund that we used to have. Now, what pays into the tree fund now is basically the options to pay in lieu by developers or homeowners who don't want to pay for the replacement of a tree. That's fine, but also we could also have an Arbor Day and even a Earth Day special focus on education and communication, and tie it into raising money for the city's tree fund to cover these costs that we've just identified. We would also explore the possibility of, I don't know if other cities do this, but memorial tree fund possibility for people who want to honor their loved ones with a tree, planting a tree or a number of trees in their honor. We could also approach the city tourism department. There's an ample opportunity here to try to have sustainable tourism in this town, and we know that greenhouse gas emissions from a lot of air flights, that the airport celebrates more and more flights being added to this area. that we could ask the tourism board to work with us and members of this commission and the community to develop a way that we might either solicit contributions from tourists to add to the tree fund so they could help expand this tree canopy and maintenance that we've been talking about. So that would be my hope, that we could work on reactivating the city tree fund along with the other points we've been addressing here tonight. So thank you.
Well, I'll start by saying how gratifying it is to see this high level of interest in this topic. The Parks and Rec Open Space Commission deals with requests for tree removals at every meeting. And what we're lacking is a consistent set of standards in making our decisions. It's pretty much a case-by-case basis. And I think that this report moves us light years ahead, because if you set goals, you have to build a map, and to build a map, you have to know where you're starting from. And this would be very instrumental in helping us deal with this. And I think the concept that if you're removing a tree and your area is not suitable for a replacement, you could do it in another area. That, I think that's just a great idea. Otherwise, everybody's input was really insightful, and I think the future looks bright. So, thanks.
Could I say one more thing?
Ms. Mizraka, yes.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, can you comment at all on the feasibility of, or not, of commission members to be able to gather from various commissions in keeping with being less than a quorum for each commission?
Sure, there's a couple things going on. There's not just the less than a quorum aspect. When we create ad hoc committees, you have a specific direction. You have been created for this thing, and you have a certain time frame in which you're doing it in. So if we were to do more of that joint, then all those commissions that would participate in such a thing then would appoint at their meetings who would be in that role, and you would all have the same direction. So let's just say we do move forward with doing an urban forestry management plan. Taps into a lot of the things that you guys talked about and some of the missing, I would say, information that was commented, like in our canopy study, and the how do we take that tree inventory and take it to the next level and utilize it. Let's say we said, okay, let's do a joint subcommittee of ad hocs, of representation of those. We can do it two ways. One, we could say, hey, city council, these commissions would like to participate in a subcommittee specifically focused on creating an urban forestry management plan. We would like 2 representatives from each commission. Here's the resolution, and we create that. Similar to what I did with the general plan task force. Or we create ad hoc subcommittees within each one with the intent that they're going to participate together with staff, and we would hold meetings around that. The thing about Brown Act and ad hoc committees and things like that, a lot of the times we've been having ad hoc committees, they are open to the public if public wants to participate or they have questions and things like that, totally fine. We just don't have to do agendas. Sometimes with the subcommittee, we do agendas. So they have to adhere to the Brown Act. We have to do agendas, we do minutes, things like that. So those are the 2 different types of opportunities that we can create. We just need to be all on the same page now that you have a parks director. And we have a sustainability coordinator. We've got more people than just me and Jacob
Yeah, right.
to kind of help with that.
What about casual gatherings?
So you all
So
are.
we all want to meet in the plaza and chat.
Yeah, you are
Not all, but some.
yeah, you're all a representation of a commission, which is an appointed body. So it's hard to say, oh, we're going to get together and chat, but I'm only inviting these people, and you know the rules, like you can't then talk. So right now there's 4 of you. So what if you 3 were meeting and now your chair is left out of the whole conversation until you come to an actual commission meeting, then you can all talk about that subject matter. So I would recommend no casual gatherings. If you want to have a joint, then talk to us staff. We'll have it. We'll make it happen. I know that if there's certain topics, we've talked about it in climate action, we have it in planning commission too. We have specific ad hocs that are doing very specific things. We meet with staff, we have meetings. In some cases, climate action meets without staff and then comes back to staff and says, okay, this is what we talked about. And then we come to the whole commission these are all the things that we talked about so that all commission knows what's going on. So those are the different ways that we've done it with the 2 different commissions that I'm responsible for. And I'm not going to talk for Director Jans on how he wants to manage those kinds of communications. But we do have some restrictions under the Brown Act that we just need to be cognizant of. If some people just don't know, if they see the 3 of you talking, they don't know that you're just friends hanging out necessarily sometimes at the plaza. That's why at the meeting that we just did on Sebastiani, I knew I was going to have more than the requisite, 3 commissioners for planning commission. So I just noticed it. I said, you know what? There's going to be more. I'm just going to notice this as a meeting, just to cover our bases.
I'll just add to that I think, spot on with what Ms. Gates is saying, but I think there's opportunities for us to meet either as a commission or as ad hoc. I recognize PROS only meets once a quarter, and so especially when we have topics like this, there's a lot of work that can be done in between meetings, and so there's definitely avenues to do that. So let's talk. I'm all for let's get some work done in between those meetings.
Well, maybe we can have more frequent joint commission meetings.
If there's interest and there's topic matters, then yes, we can. And it may be that it's just climate, depending on what the subject matter is. The reason why all 3 of you are here, as we talked about at the very first meeting 2 years ago, was you all have different roles to play in the trees world, right? So we've got planning commission that's going to look at development projects, that looks at tree removals. They also do a lot of the development code ordinances, not necessarily the tree ordinance, but other ordinances. And they have a component of the tree ordinance that they would make recommendation to city council on. Then we've got climate action that has a specific interest around climate sustainability as it relates to trees. And then the PROS also has a role to play that's identified in the ordinance with tree removals. And then with that also, you have parks, recreation, and open space, which a lot of our trees are in those areas. So that's why we have all of you, 3 of you here. But we may be having a specific conversation around something, maybe it's not even trees, I don't know. But that we have maybe 2 of you, 2 commissions or different groups. So there's always opportunities for that. I like joint commission meetings so that you're all hearing the same thing from each other. It's just can be a lot of meetings, and so that's why it really needs to have purpose.
Can I add one thing? You know, when I sit here and I look at, it's a project, right, that's about to get going, a plan, you talked about something, we want to become action oriented, and it's a democracy here. This is my first time really working with city government, and I think it feels chaotic and ad hoc. And one way to fix this is to reach where this is already happening. What a landscape architect, I think, would do with us is take what we did And they would grade it. They would see that we knew what we were doing in one area, that we had some sense of using the native plants and the existing and sort of off-the-shelf ideas, really commodity ideas, not cutting edge. And they would know that about us, that we didn't know. Rather, we're feeling like we might know soon if we kept working on this and having more committees. So in the area here, being in the wine industry, I've seen a lot of projects underway. And here in the valley, we had Andrea Cochran, landscape architect, probably one of the greatest landscape architects in the United States, based in San Francisco. And they came in to Stone Edge Farms. And they did a multi-million-dollar project. And when they were in the valley, I knew they were here, and I knew that the craftsmen were here, and all the materials were here, the lighting, the landscape lighting, the deep night lighting so you don't light up the trees too much. And so I scrambled to do a project at my own property. And I used one of her plans for a property in Palo Alto. And I plugged into that the new trees with the optimum temperature, and I replanted every single plant in my entire backyard in front. I removed all the lawns, and I reduced my water in the back. I had no trees. I had lawns and things. I reduced my water to about a third. And I used this landscape architecture planning process. And I think we might benefit by pouring our information through, some of which we think is very valuable, but I'll assure you a landscape architect would say, oh, that's naive. That's where they're naive. That's not where they know what they're doing. That's where they're scrambling, trying to find information. And this person has done, you could go to ACLA online, but she's done a project here in the valley, and they do civic projects, cultural, workplace, hospitality, hospitals, huge private residences, and they're just beautiful projects, and they're very natural. And it's right here. You can just drive over on the other side of Arnold and get a sense of what happens when somebody takes a massive project, big piece of property, and they do trees. What you would end up with is a trees type environment. And I think it might be better to pour it through that, because then the regulatory agency aspects of this will feel very familiar, because she's a landscape architect. She's an architect, and they're going to pour it through planning, and they're used to working with plans, whereas we are not even close to, we're going to, kind of go forward in some way, maybe fooling ourselves. We might need a structure, that's all. So I think what's available, which I trust, are the landscape architects when it comes to doing something new, something innovative, something bold, and something that you could turn your back on. And it's really a matter of whether you could afford to engage a landscape architect, possibly to start with the Sonoma Plaza, the buildings there, and then you just move out to all the public lands and all the parking lots. Parking lots is something that they have massive experience with. And heat sinks, and of course they do it all. They do all the cutting edge in climate change. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that in. ACLA, San Francisco.
Thank you, Commissioner McCloskey, for your thoughts. I'm going to call we'll call it a 7-minute recess to 7:55 by Apple's time. Thank you. The record here. Okay, are we missing anyone? Okay, back on the record. So at this point, I will turn the microphone back to city staff to let us know at this juncture what more they might need from us as far as comments, concerns, or questions, and that can help to inform us as to how to proceed with the rest of tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, moving forward. So we heard a lot of great comments, some great ideas. What we typically do, and we'll do on this one as well, is we'll take all of that information, put a little summary together, and it'll be presented to you at your individual commission meetings that will be coming up. We will send it ahead of time also, just to let you know kind of where we were at. We do, if there's other things that you think about and you look at it a little bit more, feel free to send it to any of us 3 or 4, Antoinette. And, you know, send it to us. Make sure you put in the subject line that's specifically about the tree inventory or the canopy master plan. And we will incorporate that to when we present to council. So what the next steps are going to be after we create that summary is we are going to reach out to the consultants and see what is feasible based on what our budget is, what the canopy study actually is intended to do in the inventory. See if there's any components, edits to address some of these comments that we can incorporate. Then from there, this will be presented tentatively on February 18th to City Council as these drafts with updated recommendations. So a lot of the things that we've talked about today are already in what was presented to you for recommendations, maybe not those exact words that you use, and then there's some things that weren't. And so we would look to update that. And then what Director Jans and I were just talking about is looking through the budget as it stands right now around our tree maintenance and other types of ongoing costs, see how some of those goals kind of fit into our ongoing budget needs, and then see what additional asks we may ask for direction from the council on. You know, as we all know, I think you all know by now, January 30th is the new City Council goal setting session. So we also are going to look to that to see what the goals are for this fiscal year, because that, as we know, helps identify what our work plans are and where we have potential funding opportunities to ask for this next fiscal year to help implement their goals. So I think that covered all of those components. So again, any additional thoughts, comments, send to us. We will individually work with your commissions.
Question for you, Jennifer. The city council goal planning, is that a daytime event like they've done in the past?
Yes, it's going to start at 12 o'clock and end around 5 maybe. But 1 o'clock is the public comment period is going to start. So 12 o'clock, they're going to re-highlight where we're at with the 25 goals, which will be at the city council meeting this Monday. If you didn't know, city council meeting, Monday, 26th. One of the items is to talk about progress on the goals from 2025, kind of set up what we're going to talk about on Friday the 30th. It is going to be at the community center this year in the main multi-purpose room that we all use, 110, room 110, the one that has that immediate access off the back. So again, starts at 12, public comment, 1 p.m.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
And I think I'll conclude tonight's meeting by thanking the members of the public who are still in attendance and for caring enough to be here, and for all the thoughtful comments we've received from the public tonight from the time that all the various commission members have spent. You know, we've talked a lot about the strengths of what was presented tonight, and we've talked about maybe a handful of limitations, which you know, in my opinion, aren't flaws, but more boundaries of what a technical assessment can reasonably provide, and kind of provide a direction where policy might go in the future. We've been able to have a pretty clear snapshot of what exists today, and the next step is, as a city, how we ensure that we can implement these plans going forward. Mr. Donnelly, you had one outstanding
I'd like to offer a quick public service announcement, since we're all here about trees. On April 3rd, Suzanne Samard, who wrote Finding the Mother Tree, The Wisdom of the Forest, is speaking at the Point Reyes bookstore on her new book, When the Forest Breathes Renewal and Resilience in the Natural World. And I think most of you probably know about her first book, where she discovered the underground internet web of mycorrhizal fungi connections, blah, blah, blah. It was very exciting, and she was also featured in The Overstory by Richard Power. So it's be a real opportunity to hear her speak in Point Reyes. So for your information, April 3, go to the website.
Excellent. Thank you for that announcement. A last final thanks to city staff for their time this evening and for their expert presentations. And once again, thank you to our fellow commissioners. Meeting's adjourned.